This meeting is called to order, and we will begin with a moment of prayer or reflection. Thank you. I'd also like to recognize that we have a guest in our gallery this evening. MP Motz is here with us. Thank you. He's here to observe.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. First item of business is adoption of the agenda.
Any additions? Seeing none, we'll adopt it.
Next item of business is adoption of the minutes. We have two sets of minutes here, special council meeting from December 4th and regular city council meeting from December 6th.
Any errors or omissions? Seeing none?
Thank you. Moving on now to our non-statutory public hearings. We have 5 of them. These are our energy bylaws. The first one is bylaw 4685 for the water service bylaw. I've received no submissions on this bylaw, Madam Chair. I'd like to open the public hearing.
Okay, I call the public hearing for bylaw 4685, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to amend bylaw 2379, the water service bylaw, to order. Is there any member of the public who wishes to speak for or against this bylaw? Please come down and state your name. Is there any member of the public who wishes to speak for or against this bylaw? Please come down to the podium and state your name. For a third and final time, if there's any member of the public who wishes to speak for or against this bylaw, please come down to the podium and state your name. Seeing no one, I now declare this public meeting closed.
Thank you. Can we get the motion, please, for second reading?
I move that the bylaw number 4685, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to amend bylaw number 2379, the water service bylaw, be read a second time.
Second.
Is there any debate? Seeing none, we will vote. And that's unanimous. Get a motion for third motion for third reading.
Move that the bylaw be read a third time and passed.
Second.
Any debate? Okay, we will vote. And that's unanimous. Thank you.
The next bylaw is bylaw 4686. And again, I've received no submissions on this bylaw, Madam Chair.
Okay, I call the public hearing for bylaw 4686, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to amend bylaw 1541, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat regulation to the use of public and private sewers and drains and the disposal of sewage and the discharge of waters and waste into the Medicine Hat sewer system. I call that to order. Is there any member of the public who wishes to speak for or against this bylaw? Please come down to the podium and state your name. For a second time, if there's anyone, any member of the public who wishes to speak for or against this bylaw, please come down to the podium and state your name. For a third and final time, is there anyone member of the public who wishes to speak for or against this bylaw, please come down to the podium and state your name. Seeing no one, I call this public hearing closed.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. We have a motion for second reading for bylaw 4686, please.
I move that the bylaw number 4686, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to amend bylaw number 1541, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat regulation, the use of public and private sewers and drains and the disposal of sewage and the discharge of waters and waste into the Medicine Hat sewer system be read a second time.
Second.
Is there any debate? Seeing none, we'll vote. That's unanimous. Get a motion for third reading?
I move that the bylaw be read a third time and passed.
Second.
Is there any debate? Seeing none, we will vote. And that's unanimous.
The next item of business is 8.3, which is bylaw 4687, waste bylaw. Again, I've received no written submissions for this bylaw.
Okay, I call the public hearing for bylaw 4687, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to amend bylaw 1805, the waste bylaw, to order. Is there any member of the public who wishes to speak for or against this bylaw? Please come down to the podium and state your name. For a second time, if there's any member of the public who wishes to speak for or against this bylaw, please come down to the podium and state your name. For a third and final time, if there's any member of the public who wishes to speak for or against this bylaw, please come down to the podium and state your name. Seeing no one, I now declare this public hearing closed. Motion for a second?
I move that the bylaw number 4687, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to amend bylaw 1805, the waste bylaw, be read a second time.
Second.
Is there any debate, questions, or comments? Seeing none, we will vote. And that's unanimous. And motion for third reading?
I move that the bylaw be read a third time and passed.
Second.
Any debate? Seeing none, we will vote. And that's unanimous.
Thank you. Item 8.4 is bylaw 4688, which is the electric utility bylaw. Again, no submissions received on this bylaw.
I call the public hearing for bylaw 4688, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to amend bylaw 2244, the electric utility bylaw, to order. If there is any member of the public who wishes to speak for or against this bylaw, please come down to the podium and state your name. For a second time, if there is any member of the public who wishes to speak for or against this bylaw, please come down to the podium and state your name. For a third and final time, if there's any member of the public who wishes to speak for or against this bylaw, please come down to the podium and state your name. Seeing no one, I now declare this public hearing closed. Can I get a motion?
I move that the bylaw number 4688, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to amend bylaw number 2244, the electric utility bylaw, be read a second time.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, we will vote. Oh, my apologies, Councillor Dumanowski.
Your Worship, just a simple question, and it's one that's been on the back end of information for forever, quite frankly, but it's the environmental conservation charge and the pre-established 950 kilowatt hours. And anyone that exceeds that, of course, there pays a penalty or a higher amount. I'm just wondering, I do get questions once in a while about that level and how it was established, and is it periodically reviewed in light of Perhaps it should be even lowered, I don't know. But what kind of review or attention do we give that, or is that just going to be a constant number that we will always adhere to? I don't know if Managing Director Mains is available.
Yes, good evening. I'm available. Through the chair, through Madam Chair, I would like to direct that comment to Jared Dickey. I believe he's on in the meeting and best available to answer that. Thank you.
Thanks, Brad. Through the chair to Councillor Dumanowski, yes. So the environmental conservation charge is the mechanism that we use to fund the HatSmart program for our residential customers. We do review that each year to make sure that the funding is available to support that program. So those thresholds as well as the rates are reviewed on a regular basis.
So if I could supplementary, just wondering then, do we keep track or have data that identifies that there is a growing demand? In other words, the surcharge that we have to put on people for consumption is growing because people's appetite or consumption of electricity is going up, or that in light of some environmental footprints and changes, obviously, that we're identifying on every level of government, that we're seeing that diminish over time. I'm curious about the surcharge in relation to trends. Obviously, that the monies go to a good cause. I don't dispute that, and certainly, as we look to develop an environmental footprint or roadmap into the future, these kinds of things will be part of that conversation. But I'm curious about trends. Do you have any data to support either way?
Through the chair to Councillor Dumanowski, yes, we do monitor that, and we are seeing trends both on the natural gas and electric side that consumption is decreasing as people become more energy conscious. So we do monitor that. We did actually review or update the natural gas environmental conservation charge last year and lowered that threshold. I think it was previously 21 gigajoules. We lowered that to 19 gigajoules. So yeah, both those charges, like you mentioned, go towards funding a great cause in our program, the HatSmart program.
Well, I'm just glad that we're monitoring it, and your last comment supports that we are reviewing it and making adjustments as needed. So thank you.
Thank you, Manager Jarrett Dickey. Are there any other questions or concerns? Councillor Hirsch?
Thanks, Your Worship. I wasn't going to bring this up as a question, but you kind of created a segue, Councillor Dumanowski, and I guess maybe the same question that Jared. What do I say to a taxpayer that feels they did the right thing and purchased an electric vehicle, and now they plug it in at home and now pay a exorbitant surcharge? So I guess it is a loaded question, so I don't maybe anticipate an answer, but at the end of the day, it's almost forced upon us to maybe rethink of what this looks like in terms of structure. There's people out there that are trying to do the right thing. It's funny, California already indicated that they don't have enough power. Actually, if everyone decided to do it tomorrow in Texas, they don't have the ability to do it. So it's interesting how our dynamic's going to change over the years. There has been, and I've received an email one time as well that said, why isn't the city paying for me to upgrade my panel to allow my vehicle to get plugged in? So, I just anticipate some of those questions that are going to evolve in our community, and just would like maybe staff to have as a takeaway, and maybe do some research and suggestions, and maybe have a future conversation over this. So, thank you.
Although there was no specific request to respond at this moment, Managing Director Mains, if you wanted the opportunity, please feel free to respond.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through the chair to Councillor Hirsch. Absolutely. We will, as our environmental framework evolves and as we look at more widespread adoption of EV vehicles, we will be looking at any of our particular policies as it pertains to that. We want to encourage conservation. We want to encourage wise use of resources, and any program that we can structure that is in that vein, we will seek that. Currently, however, we are limited by the programs we have in place, and the success of the HATSMART program is predicated on collective use of the program. However, as we move forward, I do expect that it will modify to reflect changing times. Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity.
Thanks, Brad. It is a quandary. Thanks.
Councillor Dumanowski.
Your worship, I guess to everyone, but Councillor Hirsch, you said my comments gave you an opportunity to ask a question, and your comments give me the same cause. At committee, we did have this conversation briefly, did introduce the concern for me, because I'm hearing from a similar clientele and the business community who are struggling to meet a consumer demand. So EV is changing the landscape. And so our limitation of 100 amp service, it's not a limitation, but our traditional output is 100 amp, and it's an exception if you go beyond that. But in many municipalities, they are moving to 200 amp for the very reasons you've outlined in others. I mean, as much as we are conserving energy, and there's certainly a desire to do that, there's an inverse relationship to that, and EV is a good example. And right now, if you live in I guess a more tired area of the city, like mine, not tired as in old, but it is no longer considered brand new. Certainly, if I were to want EV charging station added to my garage, presumably, as would others, and there is one resident in our court, that we would be limited. And so as we grapple with this kind of paradox of moving our environmental footprint to a better position globally, and certainly we need to contribute to that here in Medicine Hat, and there's a desire for that, we have to commensurate with that, look at our capacity at the home, and ultimately it's a footprint that is going to have a shared relationship, and it's something that is going to challenge us very quickly. There's this huge movement towards alternate forms of energy and EV and other things of that nature that draw, and if we don't keep up, we're going to have a challenge before us and no immediate solution. And the cost is considerable, but the cost of not moving down that path is equally considerable. So I do thank you actually for that segue, because it is a conversation that I know I'd like to see energy grapple with, and ultimately council. Thank you.
Seeing no other speakers, we can have the motion for third reading. My apologies. Second reading? Or, I'm pretty sure it's third.
Second readings occurred, Your Worship.
Third reading.
I move that the bylaw be read a third time and passed.
Second.
Any further debate? Okay, we will vote. Oh, but we didn't. Okay, we're going to vote on the second reading. And it's unanimous, and then we had the third reading motioned, so we will vote on that. And that's unanimous as well.
And our last bylaw is bylaw 4689, gas utility. Once again, no submissions received on this.
Okay, so I call public hearing for bylaw 4689, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to amend bylaw 2489, the gas utility bylaw, to order. Is there any member of the public who wishes to speak for or against this bylaw? Please come down to the podium and state your name. For a second time, if there's any member of the public who wishes to speak for or against this bylaw, please come down and state your name. For a third and final time, if there's any member of the public who wishes to speak for or against this bylaw, please come down to the podium and state your name. Seeing no speakers, I now declare this public hearing closed.
I move that the bylaw number 4689, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to amend bylaw number 2489, the gas utility bylaw, be read a second time.
Second.
Are there any comments or questions? Seeing none, we will vote. That's unanimous.
Sorry. I move that the bylaw be read a third time and passed.
Second.
Any comments or questions? Seeing no speakers, we will vote. And that's passed.
Moving on to reports now, item 9.1, Energy and Infrastructure Committee meeting of December 2nd. This report's for information.
I move that the report be accepted for information.
Second.
Any comments or questions? Okay, we will vote. That's unanimous.
Your worship, if you don't mind, I just want to acknowledge MP Motts for making the statement at the House of Commons in regards to some of the issues that we're facing today for the City of Medicine Hat, so thank you.
Good. Item 9.2 is Public Services Committee meeting December 13th for adoption and information with the following items for adoption: Community Vibrancy Advisory Board grant recommendation and the Emergency Advisory Committee as a standing committee.
Are there any comments or questions? Can I get a motion to, Councillor Robbins?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll make the motion with regards to the Community Vibrancy Advisory Board. I got an opportunity to sit in the board as they discussed their recommendations, and then again at Public Services. I've heard this twice. As we can see in the minutes, we received 27 applications totaling over $415,000. However, we only have $43,000, so they did some considerable work to narrow down. So I would make the motion that the City Council approves a recommendation to award the 2022 Community Vibrancy Grants as detailed in Appendix A, which we all have, for a total of $43,000.
Can I get a motion on the remainder of the report?
Sorry, I was going through the two adopted items before I moved the whole report, but I certainly will. But I can now if you'd rather.
Yeah, we would have to separate them out to deal with them individually, so we'll just, if you don't mind, deal with them.
Sure, if we
Okay.
could set that motion aside, and I would move the acceptance of the rest of the report.
I'll second.
Okay, is there any discussion or questions on any of the items in the Public Services Committee meeting December 13th, 2021? Councillor Hirsch?
Just wanted to speak to let me just get at the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. So, and I know we had the spreadsheet laid out. So what are the next steps? Like, where do we go from here? I know it's going to get circulated. We do have a review on it. Like, so I know we're going to be talking tonight about doing perhaps some budget changes, but So with this plan itself, where does it find legs? What's the next step in regards to that, if someone wants to take that question on?
Councillor Robbins?
Through the chair, thank you for that, Councillor Hirsch. The next steps with regards to the Parks and Rec Master Plan will be to bring it back to council. We've been discussing it at some length. We've had the public feedback, the public engagement, continue that into December, and now we've been able to compile all of that. So that's been running through the Public Services Committee, getting that feedback. And unfortunately, we were a little short on time, so we had to cut it off a little bit, and so we were now returning it to committee in January to continue a more fulsome discussion of exactly what you're talking about. What are the next steps? What's the short-term plan? What's the long-term plan? What's the really long-term plan? Those are the big things that we'll be discussing in January, and come back to council probably, we think, the end of January to get council to look at it and see if they agree that it should be the way we're going to move forward.
Seeing no other speakers, we can vote on the motion to receive the item for adoption and information. That's unanimous.
Item 9.3 is Corporate Services Committee meeting of December 14th. This report's just for information.
Your worship, I'll move that report as indicated.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Seeing no speakers, we can vote on the motion. And that's unanimous.
Moving on to item 9.4, the Community Housing Infrastructure and Rehabilitation Work Budget Amendment for adoption.
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions on this one? Councillor Van Dyke?
Hi, I just had a couple of questions about the, this is the infrastructure rehabilitation work on the city-owned Southlands properties. And I'm just wondering, based on the briefing note that we had, I was wondering if someone could tell me how old the buildings are, if there was any warranty left on them, and did we get the expected lifespan out of the current system that we're looking to replace?
Madam Chair, I'll refer that to Managing Director Mastel. Go ahead, Brian.
Good evening through the chair. Just looking up the date of the property. I'm going to say it's within the last 10 years, but I'll maybe get it here momentarily. I don't think we hit the expected lifespan for the systems, but they are failing, and the maintenance that was attempted to resolve the issue did not do so, and hence why there's a recommendation to replace the systems outlined. Hopefully I touched on the questions. If I missed one, please let me know.
About the warranty from the builders, is there any, are we past that timeline?
No, there is not any warranty remaining on those systems. And the units were built in 2013.
Just for further clarification. On the, I don't know what that was, on the chart that accompanies the briefing note, I just wanted to clarify, it says Community Development TCA 2021, and then the actual amount, 375,000, is under 2022. So just to clarify which year this budget, which budget year this is amending.
Through the chair, possibly Managing Director Eger will have something to add, but I believe it's TCA that be established 2021 and spent in 2022. Or possibly it's just a typo with the wrong year attached to it.
Managing Director Egert, did you have anything to add?
That should be in place here immediately and then available most likely in 2022 to spend.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we can vote on the item for adoption. That's unanimous.
Moving on now to reports for reception. Our first item is 10.1, Municipal Planning Commission minutes of August 25th.
So moved. I'll second that.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, we can vote. That's unanimous.
Item 10.2 is the Police Commission minutes, November 25th.
I move that they be received for information.
Second.
Any comments or questions? Seeing none, we can vote. That's unanimous.
Moving on now to unfinished business. Item 11.1 is the 2022 Municipal and Invest Medicine Hat budget update. We do have a motion currently on the floor from the last meeting, which is the motion to adopt the 2022 Municipal and Invest Medicine Hat budget update as amended to direct and fund planning and development services to complete a city centre area redevelopment plan as it relates to the municipal development plan. So that is the motion that's on the table currently.
Okay, I believe we voted on that, and so that was passed.
Thank you, I wasn't here, so.
Councillor Sharps?
I just want to clarify, we are going through every line item of the segments, correct, to vote on?
Yep, we can definitely do that. We just need a motion to, because we ended up voting on them, both motions last time. We just need a motion to get this back on the table. Councillor Hyder. Councillor Van Dyke.
I'll second.
Thank you. Councillor Hirsch.
I believe we'd have to vote for that. To raise it from the table. Yep.
Okay. Vote. Okay, it's back on the table. There are a number of items in option 3 that we can consider for additional amendments to the proposed budget update that's before us. I would like to go through them individually, and we can have an opportunity to debate each one of them. Councillor Sharps.
I was just going to make a motion to go through each one, but we're fine. I'm good.
Any objections? Seeing none, Councillor Knodel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just like to ask a clarifying question that the amendment that we voted on last meeting still stands and that we're looking beyond that now to make additional amendments? Okay, thank you.
Okay, so the additional amendments are item B from the chart on at the end of the briefing note, reopening of Crestwood which has an operating impact of $600,000, which will be funded from operating reserves. And the comments are direct management to restore service curtailed in 2021. The operating impact represents the annual impact based on the most recent full year, not including any ongoing impacts from the pandemic. Councillor Sharps.
I just want to state my opinion on this. I feel like we're going to be approving this budget, and in this budget, we are showing that we had good revenue from electric. So one of the things as a citizen is when they pay taxes, I pay taxes, and the municipal government, in my mind, is responsible for my parks, my roads, my recs. So in my mind, as a local citizen, that is the rec center. I think, I understand why we closed it during COVID, but I think we need to reopen it. I think we need to reopen it, and I understand that we have infrastructure issues there, but before we close our amenities, we need to come up with a plan to secure new amenities. We have citizens, and whether they're a group of 70% or they're only 20%, they're all our citizens, and we need to take care of all of them. And I would like to see that we open this up, get it functioning so people can get in there and exercise and take care of their fitness and their health and their mental health. And then as an organization, we work actively to come up with solutions on all these properties to how we're going to replace them, how we're going to serve the community, and listen to what the community has to say.
Thank you, Councillor Sharps. Councillor Knodel.
Thanks, Mayor Clark. I would like to echo Councillor Sharps about this concern of there being something to cover us as citizens for recreation. In the meantime, there's people that are advocating for with signage in front of the Crestwood pool saying open the pool, and people that are advocating for the Moose Rec Center to be open because of concerns with ice time. I think the most important thing for the public to note is that there's financial struggles, and both financial and physical. Financial as a result of the physical challenges of these buildings being older and having trouble, having concerns with maintenance and those kind of costs. But there's also this social responsibility that we have. So I think we're all in the position of what's the best thing for people right now with the least impactful price tag. But I think what Shyla said is accurate, and I'd like to echo that, as we have a responsibility to make sure our people are covered and happy in the meantime while we make this long-term plan, so that we're not in a position where all of our buildings around the same time, they're all, 40 plus years old, older than that, 60 plus years old, some of them. And we're faced with this very large price tag, but we have a responsibility to the people. So it's been a interesting conversation to have, and I hope we do good for people.
Councillor Dumanowski.
Well, Your Worship, the comments are well intended, well stated, and I don't necessarily dispute them. I do know that I think all of council was able to participate on a tour of Crestwood and the Moose Center. And certainly I don't feel it's my role, but I do want to take a moment to not defend, but to generalize, I guess, the timeline associated with the closure. Not trying to convince anybody to necessarily agree, but the reality of the matter was that in our last term, council was grappling with, and certainly we still are as a community, with a pandemic and its impact on facilities. We had lots of direction, obviously, from our provincial part as far as what could stay open, what couldn't. At the same time, we had the need, I guess, to lay off or redirect staff. Staff for a facility like this is very specialized in many cases, and there's a shortage, quite frankly, of those staff types, and that being lifeguards, et cetera. And then, of course, with the pandemic kind of ebb and flow, and the need to open and reopen facilities, it became apparent that we were caught. And even though there was a sounding board of reopening at periodic times throughout the pandemic. It's not just something, it's not a light switch you can quickly open and close. You have to redeploy. You have to ensure all the staff is there to have a facility like this run smoothly. So in saying that, we also had the need, and it was identified that we had a number of failing components in facilities, and the need to redirect funds to not only operate them, but to make them function. So this convergence of timing, if you will, of a pandemic with an aging facility with some, mechanical and infrastructure concerns, and quite frankly, the desire to have a recreation master plan review, which Councillor Hirsch moved and I supported. We found ourselves in a position of doing a little bit of a wait and see. This was a very hot topic during the election, and I don't want to dismiss that. The quick, and I don't want to say easy response, but the quick response certainly would be to say, yes, let's open it, let's get it operational. The public have spoken, and certainly they have. My commitment during the election, and I don't know what everyone said, was that I wanted to and certainly would respect what the public brought forward. We haven't had the opportunity to hear from the public in a meaningful way yet in the form of a report. And I appreciate that in the meantime, that pause or that hold puts an area of the community and the broader community in a holding pattern, which isn't easy. People are eager now that we've had the opportunity to be vaccinated and comply with everything that people wanted to do in order to enjoy the public facilities. There's a desire, there's a demand, a pent-up demand to operationalize these facilities and get them going. At the same time, we're dealing with a budget that is not bottomless, and we have to reconcile all those things. And so there are a lot of push-pulls at play here right now. I do find myself sympathetic to the public's desire to have this open. Council has heard that resoundingly. And so as much as I'm saying it's an easy but challenging decision to make, at the same time, it is one that I think we heard resoundingly, and those comments didn't fall on deaf ears. My only concern, and maybe my question to staff, is I did hear that there's a true real operational cost that we can see before us. What critical elements, do we have any concerns around the infrastructure and the mechanical systems, et cetera, in this facility? In other words, if we go to open the doors, can we do that? Or can we do that in a way that is going to give us some confidence in keeping it open? In other words, if we open it and we find ourselves a few months from now, we're having to shut it again, only to disappoint the community again, I don't want to do that either. So before I give my definitive response as far as support, I would like to understand, are there any immediate costs associated outside of operating to reopen it from the standpoint of mechanical and critical infrastructure?
Through the chair, I'd like to refer that to Managing Director Mastel. I know he's done some considerable work on that front. I appreciate the question because it will start to define when the facility might be available, assuming the amendment passes, and under what circumstances. Brian, can you go ahead?
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, certainly we've discussed the ability to reoperationalize that space with the facilities group, and they have expressed an ability to move quickly and refill the pool and get circulation systems going and all the building systems up and going. But they have flagged that it is an aging facility, so it's late in life cycle, and it has been dormant for a considerable period of time. So there are risks associated with trying to reoperationalize the space, and they wouldn't become aware of those until they started down that path. So they have raised that, but when it was closed for the pandemic. It was operating just fine, and it's our hope that we could return it to that state through a recommissioning process. The staffing, as you've highlighted, is probably our longest timeline item to get staffing hired, and certainly lifeguards are in short supply right now. So that is probably our biggest timeline issue that we would have to resolve, pending any issues with the building systems as they try to refire them back up. So that is a risk, but we're hopeful and confident that we could get them up and going.
Just if I could, Your Worship, then in light of that, I understand that there are risks and there are some unknowns, but if there are no immediate needs that we can identify that outside of the operating costs, which are not insignificant, I find myself inclined to agree with comments, both what I've heard from the public and our councillors that spoke before me about operationalizing this facility in the interim until we can establish a direction. And even once we have established a direction with our rec master plan, if it called for new development or otherwise, that is going to take considerable time, and it would be nice to see now that we are trending being the key word, toward normalcy, or at least hopeful of that, we have the ability to probably keep a facility like this open once we have the proper staffing in place. So I find myself in support.
Councillor McGrogan?
Yeah, I just wanted to voice my support of opening the rec center. I want to thank staff for, I think, a really informative tour of the facility that did point out some of the long-term issues with the building that I think we need to address, including basic usage. But if we mix that up with pandemic versus financially fit, you know, it was kind of confusing, and even through the election process, a lot of people were pretty emotional about opening that pool or that facility. And I just want to say that I think that we should leave. I really look forward to the recreational master plan. It's kind of like poor timing right now. We've got a recreational master plan that's coming due. But in the meantime, before we have a shovel in the ground on something new or repairing what we've got, whatever the case might be, depending on the outcome of the study, I think the facility needs to be open. Thank you.
Councillor Hirsch?
Thanks, Your Worship. So I think it's just important for council and just the general public to understand what some of these decisions would potentially mean going forward. Number one, arguably, if we move forward with reopening these facilities, and I say facilities because I think there's a general feeling, so we would open them and we would do the changes, and quite frankly, they're kind of Band-Aid approaches. They're not comprehensive by any stretch. But the only challenge of that is we're putting kind of money back into a facility that's tired. So for me, now being a fairly practical individual, I would want to utilize that facility. So what's going to eventually going to happen is we're going to postpone any type of future facilities, quite frankly, into a later date, because we really should be utilizing these facilities until fail. So as Councillor Dumanowski indicated, I did make the motion to do the recreation master plan because I had a fear, and the fear is now realized, that we really don't have a new facility to ribbon cut to replace one that's now failed. So we find ourselves in a quandary now, and the citizens of Medicine Hat are unfortunately all of us are now in this situation. But I think going back to my commentary about what's the ramifications. So if we add up some of these amendments that we're doing, and knowing for every 1% of increase to taxes, it's $800,000 effectively. So if we're looking at roughly about $1.4 million, that's close to a 2% increase to taxes. And we're talking about coming from operations. So knowing we did a lot of heavy lifting the last term, looking at cost controls, expenses, etc., I think it's just eyes wide open to both council and the community to know that if we do this, there is with ramifications. That's not, I can't find any magic to suddenly reopen this without it being costing to the individual. So I am one of a big fan of, again, I've already indicated this, to have another facility to remedy the one that's tired, and we're not in this case, and I think we'll get there. But again, I think it's just prudent for us, if we do this, these facilities, although it's marked for, you know, that we would discontinue some of these facilities in the future, but it does make sense for us to use them until fail. I think it's important for people to understand, if we, again, get council support and these get funded, it's going to take some time. It's not suddenly that tomorrow Crestwood's going to be open, or Thursday the Moose is going to open. It's going to take some time for us. Again, as it was indicated, we have to replace a slab at the Moose. So, you know, from a timelines perspective, it's going to be not a month. It will take months for us to get these fully operationalized, and we'll leave that with staff's hands. You know, if this does get moved tonight, for them to quickly operationalize this direction from council. So I just want to make this very, very clear to both council and the community. Thank you.
Councillor Van Dyke?
Thank you. I've heard from hatters about this, probably it was the second most common thing that I heard about in the last year, probably, actually. There's a lot of frustrations from the swim club that was in that facility, aquafit classes, a lot of seniors that use that facility and rely on it for a variety of reasons. Because of the distance, it's closer to a lot of parts of the city than the Big Marble Go Center, and the cost is less than using other facilities. And so people have relied on that. And I agree that we need to be cautious in putting money into aging facilities. But I think that we want to be able to see people having access to facilities like that while we work on a longer, bigger plan. We know that the facilities are aging. We're going to have to replace some of them. We have other issues to work around with that, with utility infrastructure needs and locations. And so to shut this down in the meantime and just reduce access in the community, I don't think is the best thing to do for our community going forward. So I'm hopeful to see that the Crestwood pool would be accessible for people while we work on a bigger plan around parks and rec facilities in the community.
Thank you. Councillor Sharp, Councillor Hyder.
Through the chair, probably just to echo Councillor Van Dyke's words in that it's imperative that we have facilities for our citizens to utilize. We heard it loud and clear through our campaign. We have tons of user groups that use the ice, and a great group of people that use the community Crestwood pool. So moving forward, this is definitely a decision that council has to make. When I look at the numbers and try to digest it, it's challenging, I guess, for a newcomer and to understand the costs that come with operating these facilities, but it is for the betterment of our community. What I'm really interested in from James, Will, and Brian Mestel and their team is the plan moving forward, because like Councillor Hirsch has echoed, these will not last forever, and I'm truly excited to be part of the future plan of Parks and Rec in this community.
Councillor Sharps?
So just wanted to address a few things. I guess what somewhat surprises me is that we didn't know they were aging. I feel like this isn't a new conversation. We knew when we built them, and every year going forward that they're going to be an X amount of age on a certain day. So it's not like we can sit here, in my mind, and this is no slag against past council, it's just us as a group of individuals moving forward, we need to own the fact that this is our responsibility, and we need to ensure that the preventative maintenance is being done and planned for and budgeted. So when we're all off on council. I'm not going to, I'm done in 4 years. I want to make sure that I fought every step of the way to ensure that we allocated money for this. If my car is breaking down, I can't just go buy a new one. If I don't have the cash, I got to fix this and keep going because I got to get to work every day. So that's my first thing. I guess I'm not appreciating the fact that we're acting like it's a surprise, because it's not a surprise. We knew these facilities were aging. Less than 5 years ago, we dumped about $500,000 into HVAC in that Moose. So we knew that we were going to do some work. And then when COVID hit, obviously we had to make some decisions, but those were also, that was over 2 years ago. That was March 2020. So we need to kind of own this and make sure that, looking back in the rearview mirror, that we own our actions and don't do the same actions again, and ensure that we're making plans not to find ourselves in this same situation. Because I think there was great people around council last 4 years, and it's our job to take it to the next level, and it's the next 4 years to take it to the level after that. So I think each council has to do a little bit better and strive a little bit harder. But to say that we didn't know, I just think that that's not fair to the citizens. We did know, we made a decision, and now we got to fix that decision. And I understand, Darren, that it's going to take money to do that. And I think we need to figure that out and plan it, because we can't just keep giving them tax increases. But if our services are being limited, that is what they're paying for, right?
Councillor Robbins.
Thank you, and through the chair. I think when we all ran for council, a lot of us heard and said and believe we should have evidence-based decision-making. That's sort of what I do in my other day job. And so here's the evidence I have sort of collected in a very brief way about Crestwood. So things people have already said. Crestwood is aging, it needs updates, and we don't know if it's going to last much longer. 5 years is sort of our best case scenario. That's what we heard in the evidence we collected in our tour last Monday. We also heard that not enough people are using Crestwood, and that's sort of a message to the community here, is like, if the use can increase, then the expenditure makes more financial sense. The fewer people use it, the more money we spend, the harder it is to make a decision to fund Crestwood again. So I want to encourage people to think of Crestwood and use Crestwood in new ways that maybe you haven't you got really excited, as I did, about the Leisure Centre, now the Go Centre, and I sort of forgot about Crestwood with its rope swing and deep pool, that maybe I got to think of it as a new way of recreation. We have some other problems that need addressing. I think we've all heard on council, loud and clear from the community, is that swimming lessons in the prime time for school kids of evening and weekends, that's at a premium, and there just aren't enough to go around. So the ability to have another pool where we could offer those services would certainly be something that would be very responsive to the community. We also heard, as I've heard too, the swim club kids would really like to go back to their club potentially. I mean, they don't have to, but they're always welcome at the Go Centre, but if that was a choice they made. And there's some potential for more creative recreation there, and I certainly know public services and the team there are going to work hard on all of that. So I come down to it for myself that this decision is for the 2022 budget only. I don't have to make a long-term decision about the future of Crestwood Pool. I don't even need to make a decision today about 2023 budget, operating budget for Crestwood Pool. All I have to do is say is in 2022, it is the right thing to do for the citizens of Medicine Hat to fund this Crestwood Pool, so that out of $600,000 is not a small amount of money. What happens beyond that into 2023, whether we repair it or replace it, thankfully is not on the table today. One $600,000 decision is on the table. So that's my evidence summary for the reasons I've articulated. I'm going to support funding for the 2022 budget based on that evidence-based decision-making, which I promised people I would do.
Councillor Canoto.
Thanks, Mayor Clark. So on the opposite side of the token as Ramona, it's really cool to hear you talk about this responsibility of the community to ensure that we have people going to these spaces and places. And I think During our tour, I was excited to hear people ask questions about, well, what else could we do with the moose? What do people do when they come to the Crestwood Pool? How many people come to the Crestwood Pool? So my question for staff, and it could be potentially responded to here and now or later, would be what kind of innovation exists to increase usership surrounding programming? So what kind of programming changes could we do to target our younger audience that may not necessarily have even been to the Crestwood Pool because they've grown up here going to the Go Center? So that is maybe Managing Director Mastel could quickly chime in and tell me, is there anything? Yep, go ahead. Yep.
Could I maybe suggest that he have some time to consider that and maybe get back to us on that one?
Absolutely, yes.
Councilor Dumanowski.
Well, Your Worship, I'd like to take an opportunity to respond to Councillor Sharp's. I understand her point, and in we said we wanted to have more discussion and more robust debate, so I'm going to contribute to that. You know, having been on the last council, certainly have to own those comments, but my integrity is important too, and so I want to go back to a couple of things, and I heard, we all know the old saying that timing is everything, and certainly I'm gonna explore that a little bit or unpack that. As far as the evidence, you got to understand, it's a simplistic. I will argue to look back over the decisions made by staff and council. To just it wasn't an arbitrary no. Let's shut it down. You have, when you look at the timeline of COVID and its impact, we can look at it today backward with clarity. We know where all the pivots were. We know where all the challenges were. We know where all the pauses and stops and goes were. We had no such roadmap going forward. What we did have is the need with accelerated financially fit. That shouldn't have been the first one to start with, but we had the need to make find considerable savings. At the same time, we are in the midst of a pandemic where there's shutdown of everything: schools, communities, shopping, retail, restaurant, everything. We forget that. So a pool fits into that equation. And at the same time, we have this this human resource called lifeguards and others who are not an easy commodity to come by. And so as we're working through the ebb and flow of a pandemic, at the same time, we did know, and certainly staff did identify that that it is a tired facility and needs some upgrades, and in some cases, we'll come to that, some critical upgrades in order for them to even function going forward. Hopefully, we're not in that immediate position with the Crestwood Pool, but we didn't know what that is going to look like. We didn't know what that roadmap is going to look like going forward, and certainly we had to project, and that's what a responsible council does. They project and they make decisions based on all the inputs. That is evidence-based decision-making. The evidence at the time indicated we're not sure if we're going to be open. We got an aging facility. We don't have the staffing. We don't know if we're going to be able to open and close. We can't do that on a whim. And certainly that's what we made our decisions on. And I want to make that very clear, because not because this is an election year, we're past that, but because it's important for the people to understand the history associated with this decision. But to the point that was made today, the evidence today indicates that we have a rec plan that is forthcoming. There will be no immediate turnaround point regardless of what its outcome suggests. Can we afford it? What will it look like? Will we upgrade current facilities? Will we close many of them and build new mega centers? Those are up for grabs in this rec review, and the public is participating in that. The evidence from that will dictate the financials of this municipality, will dictate what we can do. Right now, the evidence indicates that people have done the responsible thing and have complied. We have a high vaccination rate, which I applaud. We talked about that many weeks around this table. Please do your part. The community did their part. They're excited to get back to normalcy. I'm excited to help them get there. The evidence today suggests we can open it. There is a cost. There's no critical infrastructure that we understand that is going to be an impediment. We know that the rec plan is coming forward, and we know we need some time so we can open it. Thank you.
Councillor Sharps.
I'm just going to quickly respond to that. Let me be very honest, both to Councillor Hirsch and Councillor Dumanowski, and the staff and administration, city manager and all the administration. At no point am I throwing you under the bus. I believe that council directs, and I'm not saying that you should have known. What I am saying is I don't believe we communicated it well, and I think that is a difference. So you had to make the decisions. I'm a business owner. I had to make decisions. I let all my staff go, and then things change. So you hire some back. You don't. You put it into infrastructure. You don't. I get it. Been there. But when we make the decision to not open as council, I think we need to be transparent and say that and let people talk to us and find out what they want. And I think the reason this became such a hot topic was because there wasn't that transparency. And I think, and that isn't a dig, and I want to be very clear, I think everyone was so busy, but it doesn't mean we don't learn from the past and move forward and ensure that, and I think this council is really pushing things out of closed meetings. We're making sure everything's in openness to the best of our ability if there's no third party. So we're doing that. But that transparency is imperative, because there was a bit of shock and surprise when we started doing some digging and realized it wasn't budgeted to be open again. So, we need to ensure that we are being transparent. So people were upset because we weren't transparent, and I think that was the key.
Okay, can I get a seconder on the motion to amend?
I second.
Thank you. And seeing no more speakers, we will vote on this amendment. The reopening of Crestwood Pool amendment. That's unanimous. Can I get a motion to consider the reopening of Moose Center, item C, operating impact $300,000, funding, operating reserves, a capital impact of $1.2 million, funding capital reserves, direct management to restore service curtailed in 2021, timeline for reoperational would be fall 2022 following ice slab construction in the summer of 2020. Can I get a motion to consider this for amending the budget update? Councillor Sharps and Councillor McGrogan. Okay. Councillor Sharps?
Everything I said on the last one.
Councillor Robbins?
If you could just do that every time, Councillor Sharps, we'd have a shorter meeting. I'm just kidding. So after the tour of the Moose, we learned some positive things. So let's concentrate on the positive here. These are, again, it's a lot of money to spend, but we did hear that the ice plant was in great shape. We heard that the building itself was in good shape. And we heard some other things about the Moose that were really positive. We have all, again, heard clearly from the community that losing one ice rink has caused a problem, having kids and their grandparents and parents driving them to other communities to use ice. And I think earlier when Councillor Hirsch said, what's the plan long-term? I think it was a really good question. What is the plan for ice long-term? The Hounds and the Moose are aging facilities. They're not going to be forever. They're not all that helpful when it comes to tournament play. But we don't have another ice rink at the moment, and we need one so that kids aren't on the road in the wintertime or getting up as a 5-year-old at 5 o'clock in the morning to try to get to his or her skate time. So I think the decision on the Moose for me is a lot clearer. It's an asset, it will be used, and then eventually when we get into that more long-term planning, we can decide the long-term. Again, only deciding for a 2022 budget, but that the cost of the slab is considerable, so it was excellent, and I appreciate the staff who took us around and really showed us all of the issues that it had and gave us such positive news about what this long-term facility as well. So it was also nice to hear, which people may not know, is that there's plans already drawn up for improvements to be made, and so that cost amount was predictable, which is also nice to know. So for that reason, I'm certainly supporting the replacement of this lab and the ultimate reopening of the Moose when that's complete. So,
Councillor Van Dyke?
Yes, I'll just add to what Councillor Robbins said about the Moose, that I was happy to hear that the building is in good condition and that we got our money's worth out of the last slab that has been in there for considerably longer than expected. So I feel like it's a good investment for our community to put the money into replacing that slab for the ongoing use of that facility.
Thank you. Councillor Dumanowski?
I'm already up. Sorry, Your Worship. I wish I had a quick answer like Councillor Schwartz, but I don't. No, I'll be quick. I'll borrow one excerpt from my last argument. This one is actually a little bit harder for me, ironically, because not because the operational cost is less, but because we have to invest at least $1.25 million thereabouts in to reopen it, and to say for 1 year, and I'm not saying that we wouldn't go beyond that, but that's a pretty expensive price tag. I appreciate the arguments, and I don't take them light that, you know, when I hear people have to go outside of the community, but that was the case when they had this facility open, and it will continue, trust me, because people want ideal ice times. They want ideal pool times, and so as a school person who works in a school, and I'm sure Councillor Canola can appreciate, during the day, you can have your pick of any facility because they're not being used. It's during peak times, mornings and after school, early evenings. And so to some extent, you could never have enough ice rinks or swimming pools to satisfy every group. But we did hear, and I echo that we have a facility outside of the slab. It's in good shape. And it has some years left. And so again, the evidence today suggests that things are turning around. People want to get back to normalcy. They can, they should. 1.2 million isn't inexpensive, but it will certainly be put to good use for a number of years until we can grapple with what is the longer term decision with rec plans. So I will support it.
Councillor Knodel?
I just wanted to share one thing about the tour that we went on. So we started at the Moose and then we went to Crestwood Pool. And when we were at the Moose, there was questions asked about that alternative use of the space and how it could become more meaningful in programming. And when I walked in there and I thought, it would be so nice if people could see what we're seeing, be with us so you understand, you know, why is it not functional at all right now? And to state it plainly, there's a big old crack right in the middle of the slab that's making it impossible to keep the freezer system working. And the question was asked, well, what could we do? Dry land? Is there anything? And right now it's so beyond use that it's just going to sit empty and impractical. So I think it's so important to be thoughtful about what is, again, that number value, but also the social value. So that's something that I grappled with, but I wished that I had like a live stream GoPro on our tour so everyone could be part of that conversation. But just note that that's kind of the thought process that I had when walking around, is I want you to know.
Thank you. So seeing no more speakers, we will vote on the motion to amend the budget in relation to the item reopening of Moose Center. Unanimous. Can I get a motion to consider the amendment on the chart D, resources for mayor and councilors, operating impact, $250,000, funding source, operating reserves, comments, increased resources dedicated directly to the mayor and council to accomplish improved coordination of political efforts and improved communication with the community and / constituents.
I'll move.
And got a seconder for Councillor Sharps? I'm going to speak to this one. So as we all know, we went through an election that called for change, and part of that change was how we communicate with the community and how we engage the community and encourage public participation. And part of that dealt with a number of important issues that affect us as a municipality acutely, but that are the responsibility of the federal or the provincial government. So when we got elected and we came into the existing administrative structure, the current 9 councillors share a single executive assistant, and she also has responsibilities to other parts of the organization. And being that 7 of us are new, it's probably even more of an onerous task for her, despite her Herculean efforts. We don't currently have a lobbying infrastructure for the purpose of really getting our voice heard and our region's voice heard at the provincial and the federal level. This is unacceptable at this point in time, given the competition, for example, for grant monies, getting awareness for housing issues, mental health issues, substance use issues on the radar of the respective governments that are necessary to implement some changes and provide some funding in those areas. And just with respect to the communication, the type of communication that I think the public asked for from this council is not the organizational communication. It's not the media release, the talking points. It's a more engaged type of communication, back and forth, with a little bit of a different character. And that's not to say anything, against organizational communication, but it is a corporation, and corporations have to communicate in a certain way. And we as a council need to communicate in a certain way. And the hope is, personally, that eventually the cultures will align a little bit more and there will be more overlap there. But at this point in time, that just isn't the case. So I will be voting in favor of this. I think it's necessary for us to do our job well and satisfy the call for greater communication and greater influence with different levels of government that we heard in the election. Councillor Sharps?
So, shocking, I want to speak to this. So when we heard from you originally about these positions, I started looking at the other municipalities in Alberta, bigger, smaller, equal, and we're looking at 2 positions, and one of them is kind of like a chief of staff. And the first thing I did was did a little bit of research locally, and most every municipality has this. And, I think it's important that the public understand we're not looking for another administrative assistant. There's already phenomenal talent in this organization. What we're looking for is some political infrastructure. The administration has got this nailed in terms of their duties. We're looking at more of the governance. So we are a governance board. They are administration. They've got what they've got, and they're doing it amazing. What we don't do amazing is we don't politically rally the troops around Medicine Hat. They go to Lethbridge, they go to Calgary, they go to Grand Prairie, but they're not coming here, in my mind. So a couple of weeks ago, I had a current investor who reached out to me. I'm just an HR person. Why are you reaching out to me? Well, I happen to know them. But here's the thing. We need to take that up a notch. I'm grateful that they reached out to me, and I'm grateful I was able to be somewhat of a conduit. I can't only take it a few other steps. Otherwise, you get too much into the, hydrocarbon manufacturing, I kind of lose the will to live a little bit. So it really needs to go to somebody that has that competency and somebody that can go to the federal government and, help with Glenn reaching out and putting our community out there. He can't do this all on his own. He needs us to help with that. So I think that when we're looking at these positions and people are saying, oh my goodness, council is spending money, please understand that it's not a secretary we're looking for. In my mind, we need somebody that can really politically rally the ministers, the provincial to make sure we're getting all the funding and every drop of business that we can get into this community. We talk about growing and we talk about sheets of ice, and those are all great things. But if you don't have the infrastructure here to bring the jobs here and to bring in people here and the younger generation, we're not going to have that. So whether it's lifeguards or it's process engineers, we need to give them a reason to come to Medicine Hat. Until we start lobbying for those jobs, I don't think that's going to happen. So we've got council that's exactly what we're supposed to be doing. Most of us work full-time. I'm still putting in well over 50 hours, but I can't lobby. That's not what I can do. I can do my best, I can try, but we need some political suave here. And as far as social media, again, my opinion on this, nothing against the organization. They've got the city communication down to a science. What we don't have is the messaging from council. And again, I think going through the election, and we can't keep using that as the basis because the election's over, but reality is we all heard a message, and part of that message was talk to us, communicate with us, keep talking to us, engage with us. And times are changing, and like I said, in 4 years, they're not gonna want me, they're gonna want somebody younger, and I get that, that's cool. We gotta make it better for the next generation, and that's what, in my mind, we're supposed to do. But I think, in my mind, one of the biggest things when people would say to me, I'm angry, I'm frustrated, and then you would tell them, well, actually, that's not quite true. They'd be like, oh, well, I didn't know that. So that's that communication aspect. And that doesn't fall on the communications group. That falls on this group to make sure that we as council are getting our message across.
Councillor Hirsch?
I certainly appreciate everything that was stated by Councillor Sharps, I really do. The reality that I look at, though, is when you look at a municipal scan across different municipalities, they don't have the challenges financially that we do of an NGPR that has reclamation challenges. We have a massive amount, and, again, we already indicated we got to find $7.5 million still. And with this, I don't disagree with the macro message that you're selling here. I really don't. The reality is, we do have a new council. There is brand new individuals that sit around the horseshoe here. But we've had lobbying in the past. And it actually fell by the wayside, and I don't know why. We used to have quarterly meetings with our MLA MPs where we strategized, quite frankly, and we said, listen, here we are. Here's our challenges. Quite frankly, we just had the MP speak carbon capture, advocated, lobbied. How did we do that? We just told them, we talked to them. I was driving to Lethbridge, actually, and I had a friend of mine that said he's going to Ottawa, and so we got him a package right away that indicated. So to pretend that, it's kind of not within our bailiwick is absolutely wrong. I lobby when I go to my dentist, quite frankly. I have my ears and eyes wide open. So all I ask is, I'm not against the macro delivery of communication, and I accept that. But all I ask for is for us perhaps to have a journey of 1 year just to see where we're at. Because at the end of the day, we have, within our grasp, we have a communication department, quite frankly. We've talked about this before. I think they can pivot. I'm not that worried about that. I'm also really worried that we introduce 2 new members that just report to council, and that suddenly makes us a management group when we're not managers. And I think it should be, and I've already expressed this, that I'm not comfortable with this direction. I'm comfortable with the macro, and I want to underline that. Communication is definitely important, and I don't berate that. I actually champion that, and I was as frustrated in last council in terms of how we didn't communicate than I am, and I'm celebrating that right now. But I truly believe, let's take a journey in terms of reestablishing meetings with our other elected officials, both at the federal level, at the provincial level. Let's understand some things. Let's try it first, reestablish some things, because quite frankly, it was done for many, 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 many years. We wouldn't have an overpass, quite frankly, if it wasn't for over by Dunmore Road, if it wasn't for lobbying efforts and that sort of thing. So to suggest that it's dated and tired, I actually disagree. I think that's well within our bailiwick. So for that, I won't be supporting this. Thank you.
Counselor Hyder?
I just would like some clarity on the two positions. So a chief of staff, is that the person that you would like to be the government relationship builder as well?
Yes, and then they would have some other duties as well, but that would be part of it, yeah.
Okay. And then number 2 would be a social media professional. Is that what we're looking at?
I would broaden it to be more public relations, social media, media relations, so it wouldn't just be social media.
Okay, so if we just roughly breaking it down, they'd make 125 each.
No, so this is just budget. I think it's based on some rough numbers, but it would include benefits and some other things as well.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Counselor Dumanowski.
Your Worship, I'm doing my share of talking tonight. I hear the comments made by some council around the cost factor, and certainly I don't want to take away from that. One thing I have come to understand, and certainly did, this being my 7th term, which scares some people, but it is that there are times along that journey that we have the need to make changes for, not just for the sake of change, but because we feel the environment calls for it. I would agree that in today's world, the amount of engagement the public wants and deserves, quite frankly, is exponential to when I first ran. If I may just take a moment to kind of narrate, when I first ran, the public said, you do what you got to do, I support you, I voted for you, do your thing. And that meant all of us, whoever was around the horseshoe. As you move that timeline forward, there is a ferocious appetite for the public to be almost here, to borrow your GoPro point, Councillor Conodle. They want to be here, they want to have every sensory experience with the council, which can be very complex and maybe even at times feel impossible of a task. But I feel as though this election, it was a resounding call from the public to do more of that. And I have to be able to be privileged, first of all, and thankful that I'm back, but also be able to say, you know what, even though it wasn't broke, there is an opportunity to fix it and make it even better. And a very targeted communications person in that role ought to achieve that. So I'm hesitant, but I'm not. I am going to support it because I want to see what that will do. And public engagement needs to occur, or I'd be very quick in the next budget cycle to not support that. As far as additional staff, I think it was well said by the mayor. Yes, we have the opportunity, we have the air, we have our MP Motts here, and he does a great job. And I'm not just saying that because he's here. He does a great job. And our MLAs are working hard to represent their constituents, but there are gaps. And I can share an example where we were looking to put berms in place, and as a councillor, I was trying to, as staff were trying to get additional grants in order to pay for the berms that we were doing. But, and I'm not saying this to put myself on a pedestal, but I got frustrated. I asked staff's permission to start calling ministers, to start calling their support staff. Minister Phillips and her executive assistant, Dancy, at the time, and others, to say politician to politician. And I don't mean our MPs and our MLAs. I mean people who are in the portfolio, the people who have the power to pull and push. And it's very different than what staff have to do, and they do it well. And I heard the evidence that supported they were doing it well, but it wasn't necessarily deriving the results. And so once we started those conversations and we got them here, I'm just saying, we got money, and it was a different kind of a dialogue. And I think that's going to be a critical piece going forward. And, you know, sometimes you have to spend money to get money or gain money, and I think this is an investment. It ought to pay itself back multiple fold in a short time if we do this the way it's intended and we do it right. Not just people who are looking for grants, because we have staff that we could deploy for that. These are people who can help open the doors so that us, as the politicians, can start having those conversations. And yes, we can be resourceful and find them on our own, but sometimes it's nice to know exactly who to call and what their number is and where their door is. And I think I look at this as an investment in a very different way than we invested in the reopening of Moose and Crestwood. So I am going to support it, and I do believe it's an appropriate time and point to try these things and see where we get. And certainly if they don't pay back soon, I will be quick to change my position. But right now I'm quite excited by what prospects it brings.
Thank you. Councillor McGrogan?
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, I just have to say that this is a tough one. The vision is something that I hadn't expected. And when we first met, the mayor, who was resoundingly voted in by this community, said, trust me on this one, on this vision. And for that reason, I'm going to trust our mayor on this vision, and we're going through some strategic planning. If this ends up looking something different, I'm good with pulling things back. If this is a one-year budget, if we through our planning say, you know what, we need A and B and not C and D, however this looks. But I think right now I'm going to trust this process. I'm the old guy in the group, if you haven't noticed. But I will tell you that, you know, there is an opportunity. What is our return on investment by adding these two staff? The one in particular, the chief of staff, really interests me, more so than the social media communications person. I'll say that right now. But I do think that somebody who is keeping an eye on government and all those external things will really pay off for us. So I'm looking forward to seeing a return on investment. I'm looking forward to hearing more about what is the vision and what's it going to look like, and then how are we going to, what are the returns going to be a year from now when we say, okay, how did that work? We spent this much of taxpayer dollars, and what did we get out of it? It might not be, you know, it might not be a year, but for that reason, I'm going to support it.
Councillor Van Dyke?
Thank you. Yeah, so I think an important thing to remember is that right now what we are voting on, what's on the table, is just to increase the resources. The practicalities of how we're implementing it have not been determined at this time. And so we don't have to know that right now. We're just trying to determine if this is something we want to have moving forward in this budget. And the staff are doing a tremendous job and have great relationships with the regulatory bodies that they work with. And I can't say enough good things about the experience I've had since November 1st working with the staff here at the city. But they, again, are not a political body. And the connections made through a chief of staff position will enable us to dream bigger and do more for our community. I think it's easy for us to be complacent and comfortable in the idea of the forgotten corner, but sometimes we're the forgotten corner because we choose to remain insular in this community and not reach out aggressively to other levels of government and other people that can move the community forward in significant ways. And that's what I see this chief of staff position being for our city. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Knodel?
So I have a bit of overlap between Councillor Dumanowski, Councillor McGrogan, and Councillor Van Dyke. So my first thought with this, not my immediate thought, but tonight my first thought was what does investing in an asset really look like, and how the potential grant funding, connections, relationship building, and I underlined the word visibility. Like Councillor Van Dyke said, we become forgotten when we don't reach out. We're 50% of the connection to the other levels of government. Last night, I had family dinner, and I hadn't seen my stepbrother for a couple of years. We just have different worlds. And he said that he found out about me being on council from an article that was at the national news level talking about Medicine Hat electing so many women. And I think that that's the key to this, is if we do something differently, there might be a downside to it, and we can always step backwards. But if we never take this a step forwards, we'll never know. So it's a risk, just like any other, any oil and gas endeavor. I mean, obviously, the profit or the revenue potential for those big projects was incredible. But this is really important. I think if we don't reach out, or if we don't take a step forward, we'll never know, and we may get it wrong, but that's a risk that I'm happy to take.
Councillor Hirsch?
So it feels like I'm losing the battle, but I do appreciate the fact, and again, all points well made, I get that piece, but all I'm saying is that would like the opportunity while you're in the chair to experience what the traditional means is. And I do actually emphasize that I've seen active councils in the past make tremendous strides, and to suggest we're the forgotten corner, it's a bit more than that. And not that I take offense to it, but I think you can demonstrate, quite frankly, the accomplishments that's been done with business coming to Medicine Hat, and the momentum that's forming right now is not undeniable. So that being said, but I will maybe look for a plea then, if it is something that, and I'm hearing through the group saying, like, I'd like to try this. The only challenge is, and I have been here a while as well, is that when you offer and introduce new employees, suddenly they stick forever. So my question is, if it is something that we'd like to try to do, can we look at this as a contracted position for 1 year? I know we're in the semantics now, but again, as we move forward, I think I'm hearing experiment, et cetera. But if we create, and so understand the ramifications, if you don't do it as a contracted position, then what message are you sending to that applicant? And I think I'd rather be transparent in saying, listen, you might actually not be in a job if it's not successful. So I'm advocating for, at least, although you might not see my point of view, compromise in that regard.
So for clarity, right now, we're just voting on an amendment to include this in the budget for 2022. So the logistics of it are TBD. So I'm not saying that it's out of order, but this particular amendment is just for budget for 2022 rather than the logistics of the position itself. Councillor Sharps.
I just want to give Councillor Hirsch some comfort here. I know we're picking on you, but, I think that at the end of the day, if we're getting a political ally here, I don't think we have to put them on contract. In terms of, they're going to see their self-worth, and they're going to know that we see their self-worth. So if they're not bringing $1 million to the table in contacts and information and subjective, we'll know. And at the end of the day, we can part ways. I know a couple HR people that can help out here. We're good.
All right, seeing no other speakers, we will vote on the amendment to regarding resources for mayor and councilors. It passes. Okay, so now we have the budget update as amended on the table. Are there any questions or concerns in relation to the budget as amended? The budget update as amended. So this is the remainder of the budget we saw last time. Councillor Dumanowski.
I'll be quick, Your Worship. So we had good, thoughtful, deep conversation, debate about these items, and so I'd like to think we got them right. Now the question is, how do we pay for them all? I think the point is we have been blessed with some increased revenues from our utilities, but that's a short-term pay. One of the dangers of depending on something like that is that it kind of defers the realities of those scheduled payments. So, but I think it's an appropriate timing opportunity that we can work with. What I'd like to see, obviously, and we'll look to see, is what the bigger implications will be. No different than we said about the last item. Let's see where this goes. We need to know when it balloons. We need to be able to pull it back as well. So I'm just saying that as more of a caution, but opportunity as well. So because once you introduce things, it's hard to pull them back. I think that point was well made by Councillor Hirsch. It's harder to pull it back, certainly. So look forward to that future conversation as well.
Councillor Robbins?
I just wanted to express my appreciation to Managing Director Eggert and Lola, as Director of Finance. I had the opportunity, they made the opportunity, just so the public knows, of a workshop where we could come and ask any question we wanted about the budget and dive as deep as we wanted to go and look at as many spreadsheets with colorful marks on them as I could possibly want. I received all of the information in advance, had dozens of questions, not criticisms, but questions born of curiosity. I was seeking knowledge and sometimes seeking just some clarity on what the budget meant in the much bigger picture. There were several of us hanging out in the room together for about 3 hours one day asking dozens of questions, and not only asking the questions and getting the answers, the expertise of the finance group of knowing where to find. If they didn't immediately have the right spreadsheet up, it was within seconds someone found the right spreadsheet to answer those deeper questions. So I was the one that had asked for made the motion to postpone the budget last time because I felt that I had unanswered questions, and I just want to express my gratitude for setting up such a unique opportunity. First of all, I think it was very thoughtfully done, and hi Lola, I see you over there. And I appreciate it all the time. I do have more questions, not about this budget. Everyone will be happy to know. And I do think that it will really shortcut the 2023 budget process, having spent that time. So again, I really appreciate it being set up. And just so the public knows, any question I wanted to ask, I asked. There was no resistance to answering me. And that was, in my regular world, not usually what happens when I ask a question, so I appreciated it tremendously.
Councillor Hyder?
Through the chair, yes, I'd like to echo Councillor Robbins' thoughts. Dennis and Lola and your other team member, I can't remember her name, but how kind of you to stay and listen to all our crazy questions and explain it to newcomers like myself. And you've been so wonderful to work with and so patient, because I'm sure the questions, Lola, you probably roll your eyes, but I know I would. It's just been so kind of you to do that for us, and I express my gratitude. So thank you for that.
Thank you. My question is that I understand, I think the council understood going into this that there would be a mechanism for communicating the additional information to the public so that it was a transparent process. I'm just wondering if you could provide an update of how that information will be conveyed to the public. The mics just aren't working. Do you want to come to the podium?
Okay, good evening. I'm Mayor Clark, and my mic isn't working, so I'll come to the podium. Thank you for that question. In the past, we have posted some detail on the website, on the city website. We're planning on doing the same. The level of detail that you received that talked about the divisions and the departments will be included in there as well as the presentation that we made back in November 15th, which is part of the briefing notes, so we'll include that there as well. Any member of the public is welcome to look at that detail as well as any other detail we have on previous budgets. So City of Medicine Hat website, budgets and financial reports.
Thank you. Councillor Robbins?
I just wanted to help Councillor Hyder out. It was Vanessa Bonneville was the other person, I believe, who was at our meeting. And also, I shouldn't forget Managing Director Mastel, who answered some very interesting questions about Parks and Rec and public services generally. He appeared on the phone and helped us out quite a bit, too.
Seeing no more speakers, we will vote on item 11.1, 2022 Municipal and Invest Medicine Hat Budget Update as amended, both in our previous council meeting on December 6th and in this council meeting for adoption. Yep. That's unanimous.
Okay, moving on to notice of motion. Clean Energy Improvement Program, Councillor Sharps.
So notice of motion, I'm not sure if this is the right way to do it or just send it back to Energy and Infrastructure to maybe have a conversation on this. So again, looking at different municipalities, so what this is, it's a provincial initiative, but there is money involved. So I didn't look at the semantics of it, and I thought it was something that we could look at. So basically, it's an application to the provincial government that will create or require this municipality to create a bylaw. But basically, it's for businesses or homeowners or condo owners to make some changes and apply for clean initiative grants. However, I'm thinking maybe instead, if making a motion is the right way, or to send it back to infrastructure and Energy and Infrastructure to have further conversations and to draft. You'll take it? Over to Allison.
Yeah, it is a motion to send it to
I make a motion
Energy
to
and
send it to
Infrastructure.
you.
Second. Any discussion? We'll vote. And that's unanimous.
So our last item of business is our annual appointments to City of Medicine Hat boards, committees, and commissions for 2022. Typically what we do at the end of our meeting, the last meeting of the year, is for council to fill out a ballot and vote. We typically have a recess while they do that. Once we tally the results, I'll read into the record who will be appointed, and then I'll have a motion to adopt and to destroy the ballots.
Do we need? Okay, we will take a quick recess. sorry. Okay, we'll call this meeting back to order.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. I will read into the record the lucky appointees to our various boards, and then I will ask for a motion to adopt and to destroy the ballots. So here goes. The Combative Sports Commission, for a 3-year term, Brian Webster. Composite Assessment Review Board, for a 3-year term, John Allen. Local Assessment Review Board, for a 3-year term, John Allen. Municipal Planning Commission, 3 vacancies for this. So we have 2 for a 3-year term, and that will be Mark Asham for a 3-year term, and Pete Vanderham for a 3-year term, and a 2-year term for Catherine McKenzie. Police Commission for 3-year terms. We have Gwendolyn Dirk, and we have Marco Jansen. And for the Library Board, for a 3-year term, Rebecca Harper, Megan Hilgendorf, and Ina Leahy. And for 2-year term, we have Brighton Wilson and Karen Charlton. Subdivision and Development Appeal Board, Werner Fisher. And that therein ends my report.
Your worship, I'll move those for adoption and that the ballots be destroyed.
Second.
We will vote. Oh, it says we already voted. And that is unanimous. And this meeting, seeing no more business, this meeting is adjourned.